I wonder if you and I share one of the most profound and quiet fears of human existence. The fear that our own minds are deteriorating, that the very instrument we use to perceive the world is day by day growing older, more rigid, and less alive. We see it in the world, certainly, as people grow older, but I'm not just talking about the biological decline of the brain. I'm talking about a psychological deterioration that can happen even when one is quite young. A staleness, a rigidity that comes from being a specialist in one narrow line of life while being totally unaware of the vast, complex, and beautiful whole. We become specialists in our jobs, our politics, our opinions, and even our anxieties. And in this specialization, the mind builds walls, it creates deep, comfortable ruts from which it can no longer see the entirety of the field. This must be one of our greatest problems, surely, to find out whether it is at all possible to stop this deterioration, to find out if the mind can remain always fresh, young, clear, and decisive. This evening, I would like to go into this question with you, because this very inquiry, this non-verbal examination of our own consciousness, is the beginning of what has been called meditation. But I must ask you to be cautious with that word, because meditation itself has been so terribly misused, hasn't it? It's been packaged and sold, turned into 1,000 different systems, methods, and apps, all promising you peace or bliss or success. We've been told it involves sitting in a certain way, or breathing, or repeating certain words. We are not concerned with that. We are concerned with something infinitely deeper, which is the profound exploration of a radical change in ourselves, what one might call the only real revolution. The central issue that I want us to talk over together is this. Can the mind, your mind, my mind, ever truly rejuvenate itself so that it becomes fresh, young, and utterly unafraid? The simple observable fact is that there is deterioration. Now, if one looks at that fact and immediately tries to translate it or transcend it or go beyond it in terms of one's personal inclination, temperament, or belief, it all becomes a very shallow and shy affair. We say, I must fight it, or I must accept it, or I must find God to escape it. But this is not looking at the fact. This is looking at our reaction to the fact. I am asking if we can do something entirely different. Can we observe this process of deterioration as you would observe a tree, a sunset, or the extraordinary light on the water? Can you see the outlines of a blue hill without naming, without judging, without comparing? Can we, in the same way, just observe the process of what is actually taking place in each one of us? If you and I can do this, then we can take the road together. But if you cannot or will not do this, there will be a gap between us, because we are not concerned with theories or beliefs or spiritual entertainment. We are concerned, you and I, with the whole total process of living. And this total process of living, as one observes it, seems to be constantly creating an image about ourselves and an image about others. This image is built through every experience, every conflict, every pleasure, every pain. I have an image of who I am, and you have an image of who you are. And our relationship, if we have one, is between these two images. In our modern world, this image making is rampant. We call it our personal brand, our identity, our social media profile. I am an American, a European, an Asian. I am a Catholic, a Protestant, a Hindu, a Buddhist, an atheist. I am a scientist, an artist, a businessman. I am a success. I am a failure. I am anxious. I am secure. We build this image, this verbal and non-verbal structure from the fragments of our memory and our desire. We polish it, we defend it, we cling to it because it gives us a sense of continuity, a sense of being a somebody in a vast and chaotic world. And this image in each one of us begins to be more and more strong, more and more crystallized. And then there is the end. That is the end of inquiry, the end of learning, the end of freshness. When the mind is encased in the image it has built, it is no longer alive. It is a machine repeating the patterns of its own conditioning. This surely is the very essence of deterioration. So the first question I must put to you is this. Are you aware that you have this image? Can you, in this very moment, feel the presence of this image of yourself, this center from which you speak and think and fear? And if you are aware of it, even partially, we come to the most critical question of all, a question upon which everything else hinges. Who is the entity that is aware of the image? Is the image different from the I who is looking at it? Is the image maker separate from the image he has made? Or are the image making and the image the very same movement? Unless you and I understand this factor very clearly for ourselves, not as an idea, but as a direct perception, then what we are going to go into will not be clear at all and we will be lost in illusions. I perceive I have an image about myself. I am this, I am that, I am a great man, I am a little man, I am known, I am unknown. I realize this image exists. But who is this I that realizes it? So I am left with this image of myself, and you are left with yours, and perhaps just now we have become aware of this image, this me, that is the bundle of all our memories, our hopes, and our fears. And if you are aware of it, what is your next movement? What is the immediate conditioned response of the mind when it sees this image, this source of its own limitation? I will tell you what it is, because we share this mind. The observer, the I that has now separated itself, looks at this image and begins to judge. The observer says to himself, this image is the very factor that brings about deterioration. This image is what makes me suffer, what makes me anxious, what makes me old. Therefore, I must destroy this image. I must break it, control it, or transcend it in order to achieve a greater result, in order to make my mind young and fresh again. And so the great human tragedy begins, the inward struggle, the psychological civil war. The observer explains, he justifies, he strives to alter the image, or more subtly, to polish it into a better image. This is the entire game of self-improvement, isn't it? The entire industry of becoming is based on this division. I am this anxious, undisciplined, unhappy, but I want to be that calm, productive, enlightened. The observer, the I, creates the goal, the ideal, the new image, and then begins the immense and terrible effort to bridge the gap. This effort, this struggle, takes so many forms, doesn't it? Psychologically, it manifests as competition, the ceaseless ambition to arrive, the aggression, the violence against ourselves and others, the pride in our achievements, and the accumulated resentments from our failures. We believe this effort is noble. We think this battle is the spiritual path or personal growth. We believe that by striving, we are moving toward freedom. But I want to ask you to look at this more closely, to question this assumption that is so deep in our conditioning. Is it possible that this very effort, this internal striving, is itself the one of the primary factors of deterioration? The mind is in conflict, divided against itself. The I is fighting the me. How can such a mind be fresh? How can a mind at war be intelligent or clear? A machine that has friction wears out, and our minds are in a constant state of friction, a constant state of becoming, which is a state of violence. We are exhausting the brain, exhausting the psyche with this battle. And this brings us to the most fundamental and profound realization. We have been acting on the assumption that the observer is different from the image, that the thinker is separate from the thought, that the one who controls is separate from the thing to be controlled. When one realizes, when one sees as an absolute fact, not as an idea, that the observer is the image maker, that the thinker is the thought, then our whole process of thinking undergoes a tremendous, radical change. Let me put this differently. When you are angry, is there a you who is observing the anger, or is the observation itself part of the anger? Is the you who says, I must not be angry, separate from the anger? Or is that I merely another form of thought, another image created by the mind in reaction to the feeling? When you see this, when you perceive directly that the observer is the observed, the division ends. The one who says, I must destroy the image, is the image. The I that wants to be young and fresh is the oldness, the staleness. When this is seen, the conflict must stop because you cannot fight yourself. The effort, the struggle, the striving, all of it becomes utterly meaningless. You see that the I and the me are one and the same movement, a continuous stream of the past, of memory, of the known, as long as the brain, as long as the whole mind, in which is included the brain, the body, the entire psychological structure functions within the field of the image, which is the field of the known, it must deteriorate. The known is the entire collection of your experiences, your memories, your conclusions, your ideas, your knowledge of yourself, whether you are conscious of it or not. This entire field is the image, and living in that field, living from that center, is to live in the past. We are machines, you and I, operating on the programming of yesterday. A machine, however complex, however spiritual it pretends to be, can only repeat its patterns. It cannot be new, it cannot be fresh. It can only wear out. Therefore, the field of the known is the very factor of deterioration. Please, I am asking you, do not accept this as an idea. Do not file this away to think about when you go home. Let's be honest. You won't anyhow. But more importantly, an idea is a second hand, dead thing. We are not concerned with ideas or conclusions. We are here together, taking the journey now as you are listening. Therefore, you must do it now. You must see the movement of your own mind, the creation of the observer, the division, the conflict, the pretense. Not when you go home and say, well, I've taken notes, I've understood it, I'll think about it. I must ask you not to take notes because that doesn't help at all. You are merely collecting dust. You are capturing a description, not seeing the living thing. The description of the mountain is not the mountain. So the real question arises from this. The only question that has any meaning in this context: is it possible to empty the mind of the known? Am I making myself clear? This isn't some vague, mystical pursuit. One must have asked this question, perhaps dimly, or with a great sense of purpose, because one suffers, one has anxieties, one sees the futility of this conflict, and one wonders whether it is possible to go beyond it all. We are asking it now as a challenge which must be responded to. This challenge is not an outward one, but a psychological, inward challenge. And we are going to find out together whether it is possible to empty the mind of all its yesterdays, of all the images, of the observer and the observed, because this emptying of the mind is meditation. And so we come to this enormous loaded word, meditation, a word that I must ask you to handle with great care because it has been so polluted by all the systems, hopes, and illusions that humanity has piled upon it. The moment we use this word, we are already, most of us, caught in a trap of the known. In many parts of the world, this word carries an immense weight of tradition, conditioning generations of so-called religious and serious people. And now, in the modern West, it has been stripped of its depth and repackaged as a commodity, a tool for wellness, a way to de-stress from the very civilization that creates the stress, a method to become a more efficient, less anxious cog in the machine. But the underlying motive in both the ancient and modern worlds is so often the same. We use meditation because we hope to find something, to achieve a state, to gain something which is not part of our messy, painful, and often boring daily existence. We want an experience of the beyond, of the transcendent, of bliss or peace. And to find it, humanity has invented countless systems. Systems that are sometimes very subtle and complex and sometimes very crude. If we can understand one of these systems, really look at it and understand its whole structure and implication, we shall understand the totality of all systems because they are all based on the same false premise that the mind, through a method, through practice, through time, can find that which is beyond time. Let's look at them, shall we? Consider the most common system, that of concentration. This is the bedrock of so many practices. You are told to fix your mind on one idea, a virtue perhaps, or on one image, a symbol, a cross, a statue, or the flame of a candle. You are taught to force the entire energy of your mind into this one narrow channel and to push away every other thought, every sound, every sensation. And this act of forcing, of holding the mind in one place, we believe is discipline. But what is this, I ask you? It is an act of will, an act of resistance, an act of building a wall. You are in conflict with the movement of your mind. And what happens when you practice this day after day? The mind, of course, becomes narrow, focused, and sharp, like a fine tuned instrument. But it is a dead instrument. A mind that has been forced into a groove, that has learned to exclude, to resist, and to control, is a dull mind. It is a mechanized mind. It is the very essence of the deterioration we are investigating. Then there are the various forms of stimulation, the attempt to force the mind to expand its own consciousness. We believe that if we can just push the boundaries of the I further and further out, through sheer will, through determination, through effort, we will eventually break through into a different dimension. We hope to arrive at a state which the conscious mind, in its normal functioning, cannot reach. And in this category, of course, we must include the taking of drugs, from the ancient potions of the mystics to the latest chemical, like LSD. This has become very popular again, hasn't it? People are seeking the psychedelic experience, hoping for a spiritual breakthrough. And these drugs, for the moment, can give a tremendous stimulation to the whole system. The body becomes extraordinarily sensitive. You see colors which you have never seen before, colors that are intensely, impossibly vivid. You see everything so clearly, and for a moment, the space between you and that thing which you see, the flower, the face, the wood grain disappears. There is no observer and no observed. But this is a chemical reaction. It is a state of stimulation, and it is temporary. The I is still there, quiet, waiting. And when the drug wears off, the I comes back, perhaps now with a new, marvelous memory, a new experience to add to its collection. The I says, I have had a transcendent experience, and this new image becomes the new prison, perhaps even more dangerous because it is so beautiful. The same state can be achieved through other forms of stimulation, like starvation. If one fasts for some days, obviously peculiar things begin to happen to the brain, and one has visions, one sees strange things. But this is not freedom. This is not meditation. Finally, there is the most common system of all practiced throughout the world, the repetition of words. We see it in the Catholic prayers, the repetition of Ave Maria. We see it in the chanting of mantras in the East. We see it in the endless recitation of a sacred phrase. And what does this do? It is a very simple trick. If you keep on repeating any word, your mind inevitably gets so dull that it becomes quiet. You can go to sleep this way. It is a form of self-hypnosis. And in that dullness, in that stupor, you think, this is peace. I have achieved a quiet mind. But this is the quietness of a mind that has been drugged, a mind that has been made numb. It is not the quietness of tremendous energy, the silence that is intensely alive, that is full of light and clarity. It is a dead quiet, so one can brush all that aside. Can't we? Even if one is deeply committed to one of these systems, if one is looking for the truth of the matter, one must be able to throw all of that out of the window. I hope as you are listening to this, you are actually throwing it out, because we are trying to go into something much deeper than these psychological and chemical inventions. We can put all that aside because we can see a simple fact. The more one practices a discipline, a method, a routine, the more the mind becomes dull, mechanized, and repetitive. And that mechanizing, routine process, while it may make the mind somewhat quiet, is the very antithesis of freedom. It is not the quietness of profound understanding, it is the quietness of stagnation. Therefore, we must be free of all systems, all authorities, all methods to find out what is true. Then, if we have brushed aside all the inventions, all the systems, all the drugs and disciplines and repetitions, what is left? We are left with our original question, but now it has an extraordinary sharpness and urgency because there is no escape. Is it at all possible to free the mind from the known, not just the known of 1,000 years of human conditioning, but the known of yesterday, the known of the experience you had 1 second ago? This known is the vast accumulated structure of memory. Now, this doesn't mean that I must forget the road to the house where I live, or the language I am speaking, or the technological skills that are necessary to function in the world. That would be absurd, a form of amnesia. That kind of knowledge, that factual memory, must be there. But we are talking about something at a much deeper level. We are talking about the psychological level, the level where the image is always active, the image which is the I, the center, the ego, the self, which is the very essence of the known. Can the mind be emptied of that? Because this emptying of the mind of the known, this is meditation. Let us look at it in our lives. I can only understand you, or my friend, or my wife, or my husband when I have no image about you. But I do have an image, don't I? I have an image of you built from all our past experiences, from all the pleasures and pains, the insults and the flatteries. And you have an image about me. Our relationship then is not a living thing. It is a relationship between these two images, which are dead things, things from the past. And then we wonder why our relationships are so empty, why there is such loneliness and separation between us. We are not in contact at all. The images are in contact. So one sees very clearly that only when the image doesn't interfere, the image as knowledge, as thought, as emotion, as the scar of memory, only then can I truly look at you, can I hear you, can I understand you. This has happened to all of us, surely, in very rare moments. Perhaps you are in a discussion, an argument, and you are pointing things out, and suddenly your mind becomes quiet. The image, the opinion, the defense, it all drops away. And in that instant, you see, you say, by Jove, I've understood. That understanding is not an idea. that understanding is an action. It is an action entirely different from the action that we know, which is always the action of the image, the action from the known. We are talking then of an understanding which is an action that takes place only when the mind is completely quiet. And this quietness is not something to be practiced in a corner for 20 minutes a day. This is meditation that one can do when you are sitting in the bus, when you are walking in the street, or when you are washing the dishes. It has nothing whatsoever to do with controlling your breathing or sitting in a special posture. The mystery of life is not to be found in these shallow tricks. The mystery, the beauty, the sacredness of life is beyond all this, beyond the image, beyond effort, beyond the entire centralized, egotistic, self-centered activity of the I. There is a vast field of something which can never, under any circumstances, be found through the known. So, how does this emptying of the mind take place? It can only take place non-verbally, and only when there is no observer as the observed. This demands a tremendous quality of attention, of awareness, and this awareness is not concentration. Concentration, as we saw, is a process of exclusion, of forcing the mind, of building resistance. Awareness is something entirely different. It is to observe without choosing. You understand, choice, after all, only takes place when there is confusion. When there is clarity, what is there to choose? It is only the confused mind that says, I must do this or I must not do that. So, awareness takes place only when there is no choice, or rather, when you are simply aware of all the conflicting choices, all the conflicting desires, the strains, the pulls, the contradictions. You just observe all this movement, this contradiction, and in that observation, you see the fact that the observer is the observed. The eye that is watching the anger is the anger. The eye that is watching the confusion is part of that confusion. And therefore, in that process, there is no choice at all, but only watching what is. That awareness brings a quality of attention in which there is neither the center nor the circumference, neither the observer nor the observed. This, then, is the emptying of the mind. And all the experiences it has had, all the wounds, the pleasures, the memories, they can be emptied only when, as each experience arises, one becomes aware of it, sees the whole content of it, without choice, without judgment, without condemnation, and therefore it passes by. It leaves no mark. It does not become a wound, a scar, or something to be remembered, recognized, and kept, which only strengthens the I. This means, you see, that meditation is a very strenuous process. It is not a thing to do for old ladies or men who have nothing to do. It is not a hobby. This demands tremendous, incorruptible attention right through the day, in every action, every word, every thought. And then, if you do this, you will find for yourself, no, there is no question of finding, there is no experience to be gained. Then, when the mind is completely quiet, without any form of suggestion, hypnotism, or following a method, when it is truly, deeply silent, then there is a quality, a different dimension of which thought can never possibly imagine or experience. It is beyond all search because the seeker is gone. The seeker is the known. It is only the dull, confused mind that is always seeking and hoping to find. And what it finds, please see this, is always the result of its own confusion, its own projection. So, in all this, in asking questions and listening to explanations, what is important? The explanation, this talk, has no value at all. What has value is how you ask the question and what you are expecting out of that question. If you are truly attentive to what you are asking, if you see the motive, the fear, the hope behind the question, you will see that the question is answered in the very clarity of that attention. Therefore, there is no teacher, no guru, no pupil. You are everything yourself. You are the teacher, you are the pupil, you are the master, you are the follower, you are the one who is confused, and you are the one who is the light that dispels that confusion. And understanding this, realizing this, not as an idea but as an absolute fact in your life, gives you tremendous freedom. The freedom to inquire, the freedom to be